My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a digital marketing consultant in Seattle, Washington. For the past 8 years, I've built a comfortable life for myself. A downtown condo with a view of Puget Sound, a 6-figure income, and the kind of professional respect that once seemed impossible. But this story isn't about my success. It's about the person who tried to make sure I never achieved any of it, and how I used every skill I'd learned to systematically dismantle the empire of lies he built on the foundation of my suffering. Let me take you back to where this really began. 15 years ago, I was a 19-year-old college freshman at the University of Washington, skinny, socially awkward, and drowning in imposter syndrome. I'd gotten in on a full academic scholarship, first in my family to attend university, and I was determined to make my immigrant parents proud. That's when I met Brandon Hartley. Brandon was everything I wasn't. 21 years old, a junior, 6'2" with the kind of effortless charm that made people gravitate toward him. He came from old Seattle money. His father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Pacific Northwest. Brandon was the president of the business fraternity I'd naively joined, thinking it would help my career prospects. Instead, it became the setting for 2 years of systematic humiliation that would scar me in ways I didn't fully understand until much later. It started small. Brandon would forget to invite me to study groups, then mock me in front of others for not knowing about group projects. He'd post photos on Facebook. This was 2010, remember, with captions like, "Business Leaders of Tomorrow," that included everyone from our marketing classes except me. When I landed a competitive internship at a local tech startup in my sophomore year, Brandon started a rumor that I'd slept with the HR manager to get it. The rumor spread like wildfire. I lost the internship after someone sent an anonymous email to the company repeating the allegations. But the worst came in March of 2011. I'd been dating a girl named Sophie for 3 months. My first real relationship. She was sweet, studying environmental science, and she actually seemed to like my awkward intensity. Then one night, at a fraternity party I'd reluctantly attended, Brandon cornered Sophie while I was in the bathroom. By the time I returned, he'd convinced her that I'd been talking about her behind her back, calling her desperate, and saying I was only with her because she was easy. He'd fabricated text messages. I never figured out how, that appeared to be from my number. Sophie dumped me in front of 40 people at that party. I tried to explain, to show her my actual phone, but Brandon had done his work too well. She slapped me and left. The fraternity brothers laughed. Brandon stood there with this smile, not even a smirk, just a pleasant, innocent smile, and said, "Tough break, Chin. Guess honesty is important in relationships." I dropped out of the fraternity the next day. I withdrew from 2 classes because they overlapped with Brandon's schedule. My grades plummeted. I developed anxiety so severe I could barely leave my dorm room. I thought about leaving school entirely, but something stubborn in me refused to quit. I switched my focus to digital marketing and social media management, fields that were just emerging, and threw myself into learning everything I could about online behavior, influence, and reputation management. I graduated eventually, with decent grades and a burning question I never spoke aloud. Why? Why had Brandon targeted me so relentlessly? The years passed. I built my consulting business from nothing, working 18-hour days, learning the dark arts of social media algorithms, viral content, and online reputation management. I helped companies build their brands and occasionally helped individuals quietly bury negative search results. I became very, very good at understanding how information spreads in the digital age and how to control narratives. I didn't think about Brandon Hartley often. The wounds had scabbed over, if not healed. I'd had therapy. I'd had subsequent relationships. I'd built a life I was proud of. Until September 14th, 2024, when everything came roaring back. I was sitting in a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, finishing a client presentation, when I overheard 2 women at the next table talking. One of them mentioned Brandon's name, an unusual enough name that my ears perked up. "Yeah, Brandon Hartley, he's this amazing business coach now," one woman said. "He's got like 300,000 followers on Instagram. His whole thing is helping people overcome adversity and build authentic businesses. I'm thinking about signing up for his mastermind program. It's $5,000, but apparently it's life-changing." My blood went cold. I pulled out my phone and searched for him. There he was at Brandon Hartley Official. His profile showed a carefully curated image of success. Brandon in tailored suits, Brandon speaking on stages, Brandon with his arms around smiling clients. His bio read, "From rock bottom to 7-figure entrepreneur." I teach authentic leadership and resilience. DM for coaching inquiries. I scrolled through his content. Post after post about overcoming adversity, about how he'd rebuilt himself after facing bankruptcy and personal crisis in his 20s. How he'd learned that authenticity and integrity were the keys to success. The comments were filled with adoration. You changed my life, Brandon. Your authenticity is so refreshing. Finally, a coach who tells the truth. I felt physically sick. This man, who had systematically bullied me, who had destroyed my internship and my relationship for sport, who had treated cruelty as entertainment, was now selling himself as a guru of authenticity and resilience. And people were paying him thousands of dollars, believing his carefully constructed narrative. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. I spent the next 3 days doing what I do best, research. I created anonymous accounts and joined Brandon's Facebook group for clients, 2,400 members strong. I purchased access to one of his recorded webinars using a burner email and prepaid card. I studied every piece of content he'd ever posted, watching for patterns, inconsistencies, opportunities. What I found was disturbing. Brandon's rock bottom story, the foundation of his entire brand, was a fabrication. He claimed he'd lost everything in 2012 after a business partner betrayed him, that he'd been homeless for 6 months, sleeping in his car and rebuilding from nothing. It was a compelling narrative. It was also completely false. I found his LinkedIn history, cached versions of old social media posts, even a Seattle Times article from 2013 about successful young entrepreneurs that featured Brandon. In 2012, while he claimed to be homeless, he was actually working a cushy job at his father's dealership and living in a condo in Bellevue. There had been no business partner, no betrayal, no sleeping in cars. He'd simply decided, around 2016, that a rags-to-riches story would sell better than the truth, that he was a privileged kid who'd been handed opportunities. But the fabricated backstory wasn't even the worst part. As I dug deeper into his coaching business, I found testimonials that seemed suspicious. I reverse image searched the profile photos of some of his most enthusiastic clients, the ones whose transformation stories he featured prominently. 7 of them were stock photos. The glowing testimonials were fake, attributed to people who didn't exist. I also discovered that several real clients in his Facebook group were quietly complaining that Brandon's custom coaching was actually the same generic advice given to everyone, that he'd promised personalized attention but disappeared after receiving payment, that his proven system was just repackaged content from free YouTube videos. These complaints were quickly deleted from the group and the people who posted them were removed and blocked. Brandon Hartley was running a sophisticated con, using fake social proof and a fabricated backstory to extract thousands of dollars from vulnerable people looking for guidance. And his empire was built on a carefully managed online reputation that I knew exactly how to destroy. On September 18, 2024, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront Brandon directly. I wasn't going to report him to some authority that might or might not care. I was going to use every skill I'd developed over the past decade to engineer his downfall using the same medium he'd weaponized to build his false empire: social media. The planning took 3 weeks. I'm a professional, and I was going to do this right. I needed it to be devastating, public, and most importantly, completely impossible for him to recover from. I had to be careful. What I was planning existed in a gray area legally, and I couldn't afford to cross the line into anything actionable. First, I created a fake social media profile. Not as myself, that would be too obvious, but as someone named Jessica Martin, a 28-year-old marketing professional from Portland. I used an AI-generated face for the profile photo. Technology had advanced enough by 2024 that these images were indistinguishable from real people. I spent 2 weeks building out Jessica's profile, creating a believable history, posts about her dog, her coffee shop visits, industry articles she shared, photos of Portland landmarks. I followed relevant people in the digital marketing space, engaged with their content, built up about 400 followers through legitimate networking. Jessica needed to appear completely real. Then I had Jessica join Brandon's Facebook group and sign up for his email list. She engaged positively with his content for a week, leaving encouraging comments, asking thoughtful questions. She was building trust, becoming a familiar presence. On October 9th, Jessica sent Brandon a DM expressing interest in his premium mastermind program. Brandon took the bait immediately. He sent her a voice message, his closer, apparently, talking about how he could see so much potential in her and how his program would unlock her authentic power. The sales pitch was smooth, practiced, and entirely impersonal despite his promises of customized attention. Jessica expressed concern about the $5,000 price tag. Brandon offered her a scholarship spot for $3,500 if she committed within 24 hours, a fake scarcity tactic. Jessica committed. I used a virtual credit card with limited funds to make it look legitimate without actually risking real money. Brandon sent her access to his exclusive content video modules that were, as I'd suspected, generic business advice repackaged with slick production. But here's what Brandon didn't know: by accepting Jessica as a client, he'd given me legitimate access to his private client community, his supposedly exclusive content, and direct communication with him. I was inside his operation, and I had every legal right to be there as a paying customer. Over the next week, Jessica became increasingly active in the private client community. She asked questions, supported other members, and slowly began to notice, in a concerned, gentle way, that several of Brandon's success stories seemed inconsistent. She'd screenshot his public claims about his rock bottom period and politely point out that the timeline didn't match what he'd said in other videos. She'd notice out loud that the business principles he taught contradicted each other depending on which module you were watching. At first, other clients defended Brandon. But Jessica's questions were never accusatory, just confused, seeking clarification. "I'm probably just misunderstanding," she'd say. "But can someone help me figure out why Brandon said X in this video but Y in that post?" She was planting seeds of doubt while maintaining plausible innocence. Then, on October 23, 2024, I launched the main operation. I created a simple website called BrandonHartleyTruth.com, using an anonymous domain registration service. The site was clean, professional, and devastating. It was structured like an investigative journalism piece, because that's essentially what it was. The homepage featured a side-by-side comparison, Brandon's claims about his past versus documented evidence to the contrary. Photos of his 2012 to 2013 Facebook posts showing him at his father's dealership, living well, no mention of homelessness. The Seattle Times article. Archived LinkedIn data. Everything was sourced, timestamped, and presented without emotional commentary, just facts. A second page exposed the fake testimonials, showing the stock photos next to the client transformation stories Brandon featured on his sales pages. I'd matched 7 of them definitively, with links to the original stock photo sites. A third page compiled screenshots of deleted complaints from former clients. I'd been monitoring his group and capturing these before they disappeared, showing a pattern of unfulfilled promises and generic advice passed off as personalized coaching. I was careful. I made no claims I couldn't back up with evidence. I didn't accuse Brandon of crimes, just documented inconsistencies between his public story and verifiable facts. Everything on the site was presented as questions that potential clients might want answered, rather than accusations. Legally, I was protected by truth as a defense. Then came the distribution strategy. I'd spent years understanding how information goes viral, and I engineered this for maximum impact. First, Jessica posted in Brandon's private client group. Her message was concerned, not angry. "Hey everyone, I came across this website and I'm really confused. Can Brandon address these inconsistencies? I want to believe in this program, but I need some clarification." She included the link. The post stayed up for about 90 seconds before Brandon deleted it and removed Jessica from the group. But 90 seconds was enough for 37 members to see it and click the link. Simultaneously, I'd created accounts on several platforms: Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn, all with different personas, all real-looking accounts that I'd been building up over the previous weeks. These accounts began sharing the website in relevant communities, entrepreneur forums, business coaching review threads, even a coaches to avoid subreddit. Each post was framed differently, sometimes as due diligence I did before hiring a coach, sometimes as has anyone else worked with this person, sometimes as investigative piece on business coaching industry. The key was that none of these accounts were connected to each other or to Jessica. They appeared to be independent people who had all stumbled across the same information. Within 6 hours, BrandonHartleyTruth.com had been viewed 3,000 times. Within 24 hours, it had spread to business coaching watchdog groups and critical thinking communities. People began doing their own research, verifying my findings, adding their own evidence of Brandon's inconsistencies. On October 24, 2024, a mid-tier business podcast with about 50,000 listeners did an episode about authenticity in coaching that specifically mentioned Brandon's fabricated backstory as an example of the industry's credibility problem. They'd found my website and done their own verification. Brandon tried to respond. He posted a long Instagram story calling the website "Lies from Jealous Competitors" and "a coordinated attack by people who can't stand to see others succeed." But he made a critical mistake. He didn't address the specific evidence. He just attacked the credibility of unnamed accusers without refuting the documented facts. This made everything worse. His defensive non-denial confirmed for many people that the allegations were true. Comments on his posts shifted from supportive to skeptical. "Why not just show proof that the website is wrong?" people asked. "If you really were homeless in 2012, show us evidence. Why are you deleting comments asking legitimate questions?" By October 26th, Brandon's Instagram engagement had dropped by 60%. People were unsubscribing from his email list in droves. I could track this because Jessica's account was still receiving his emails, and his tone was becoming increasingly desperate. He sent a message to his list offering deep discounts on his programs for a limited time. The classic move of someone watching their business crumble. Then came November 1st, 2024. This was the day everything truly fell apart for Brandon, and I had nothing to do with what happened next. I'd simply set the dominoes in motion. A woman named Rebecca Torres published a Medium article titled, "How Brandon Hartley's Fake Coaching Program Cost Me My Savings." Rebecca was a real person, a real former client, who had seen the Brandon Hartley Truth website and felt empowered to share her own story. She'd paid Brandon $15,000 for his elite, year-long mentorship program. She'd received 3 generic group calls and then been ghosted. When she tried to get a refund, Brandon had blocked her on all platforms. Rebecca's article went viral. It was shared 40,000 times in 3 days. Other former clients began coming forward with similar stories. The local Seattle News picked it up. A consumer protection reporter from King 5 News reached out to Brandon for comment. Brandon's response was to delete all his social media accounts. On November 4th, 2024, Brandon Hartley official simply disappeared. His website went down. His Facebook group was archived. His carefully built empire of 300,000 followers vanished overnight. But the internet doesn't forget. Screenshots of his deleted content circulated everywhere. His name became synonymous with fake business coach in entrepreneur circles. Articles about his fabricated backstory appeared on business news sites. His father's car dealerships even received negative attention, people calling and emailing to complain about Brandon's behavior, which they associated with the family business. I learned later, through mutual connections from our university days, that Brandon's father was furious. The negative publicity had hurt the dealership's reputation, and he'd been counting on Brandon eventually taking over the business. Instead, Brandon had become a liability. According to people who knew the family, Brandon had been essentially cut off financially and told to fix the mess he'd created on his own. But it got worse for Brandon. In December 2024, I heard through the Seattle business community that several of his former clients had filed complaints with the Washington State Attorney General's office regarding deceptive business practices. I don't know if charges were ultimately filed, but the investigations alone destroyed what remained of his credibility. By January 2025, Brandon had moved to Phoenix, Arizona, using his mother's maiden name on social media. He'd gotten a sales job at a tech company, a normal job, making maybe $60,000 a year, no adoring followers, no empire. The last time I checked his new, small personal Instagram account, under his assumed name, he had 134 followers and posted generic photos of Arizona sunsets with no captions. The confidence, the charisma, the carefully constructed persona, all of it was gone. As for me, I watched it all unfold from my Seattle condo. Jessica Martin's accounts were all deleted on November 5th. She'd served her purpose. The Brandon Hartley Truth website remained up, hosted anonymously, accumulating more and more corroborating evidence from other people. I never added to it after the initial launch. I didn't need to. I never revealed my involvement to anyone except my therapist, who expressed concern about the ethics but acknowledged that I'd stayed within legal boundaries and exposed genuine fraud. I grappled with questions of whether I'd gone too far, whether revenge was ever justified, whether I was any better than Brandon had been. But here's what I kept coming back to: Brandon had built his success on lies and exploitation. He'd fabricated a story of overcoming adversity, the very adversity he'd created for others like me, and used it to extract money from vulnerable people looking for help. What I'd done wasn't create lies about him. I'd simply revealed the truth he'd been hiding and let people make their own decisions. Did I feel guilty? Sometimes. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I wondered if destroying someone's life, even someone who destroyed parts of mine, made me as bad as him. But then I'd remember Rebecca Torres and the others who'd lost their savings to his scams. I'd remember the 19-year-old version of myself, crying alone in a dorm room, wondering if I should just give up and go home. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. The aftermath has been complex. I still run my consulting business, still work with clients on their digital marketing strategies. But I have a rule now: I won't work with business coaches or anyone selling authenticity as their brand. I've become somewhat notorious in certain circles as someone who can bury negative reputations online, though I'm selective about who I work with and only take cases where I believe the negative attention is deserved. I've also become an unofficial resource for people trying to verify if their business coaches or mentors are legitimate. At least once a month, someone reaches out asking me to review a program they're considering investing in. I do it for free. I think of it as penance, maybe, or prevention. The irony isn't lost on me. Brandon taught people about authentic leadership while living a lie. I destroyed him using a fake social media profile while revealing the truth. We both manipulated social media to serve our ends, but I like to think the difference matters. I was exposing a predator, not creating victims. Did Brandon deserve what happened to him? I've thought about this question for months. Here's what I've concluded: Brandon deserved to face consequences for the harm he'd caused, both to me 15 years ago and to the clients he'd scammed more recently. Did he deserve to lose everything? Maybe not. But he built his entire life on a foundation of deception, and houses built on lies eventually collapse. I just happened to be the earthquake that triggered the collapse. As for whether revenge actually healed my old wounds, that's complicated. Watching Brandon's empire crumble gave me a certain satisfaction, I won't lie. There was vindication in seeing him lose the unearned adoration, and watching him experience consequences for his cruelty. But it didn't erase what happened in college. It didn't give me back the internship I lost or the relationship he destroyed. It didn't cure my anxiety or make me a different person. There's a part of me that wonders what would have happened if I'd confronted Brandon directly instead. If I'd sent him a message. Remember me? Remember what you did? I know what you're doing now is fake. Would he have stopped? Would he have apologized? I'll never know, because I didn't give him that chance. I chose scorched earth instead of reconciliation, and I can't undo that choice. But when I'm honest with myself, I don't think a direct confrontation would have changed anything. People like Brandon, people who can systematically hurt others without apparent remorse, who can fabricate entire backstories to exploit vulnerable people, don't suddenly develop conscience when confronted. They double down. They gaslight. They rewrite history to make themselves the victim. No, the only way to stop someone like Brandon was to remove the tools he used to harm people. His false credibility, his cultivated image, his unearned trust. Social media had given him power he didn't deserve. Social media took it away. There's a lesson here, I think, about the double-edged nature of our digital age. The same platforms that allow someone like Brandon to build a fraudulent empire also allow someone like me to tear it down. The same tools that spread lies can spread truth. The same networks that enable abuse can enable accountability. But it's also a warning about the power of information warfare. What I did to Brandon, documenting truth, engineering its spread, destroying a reputation, I could have done to an innocent person if I'd chosen to fabricate evidence instead of revealing it. The tactics I used were neutral. It was my intention and my commitment to truth that made the difference. In someone else's hands, with different motivations, those same tactics could destroy an undeserving target. I think about that sometimes, when people reach out asking me to help them with reputation management for their enemies. I'm careful about what I take on. The power to destroy someone's digital life is immense, and it should be used carefully, if at all. It's been almost a year now since I discovered Brandon's coaching empire. Almost a year since I created Jessica Martin and launched BrandonHartleyTruth.com. The website still exists, though I haven't updated it. Other people have added to the documentation, former clients sharing their stories, researchers adding context about the broader problem of fraudulent business coaching. It's become bigger than my revenge. Sometimes I look at Brandon's new profile in Phoenix, living a small, quiet life under a different name. I feel a strange mix of satisfaction and melancholy. I got my revenge. He faced consequences. But what did any of it really accomplish in the end? He's still out there, still alive, still capable of starting over. And I'm still here, still carrying the memories of what he did to me, still defined in some ways by what happened all those years ago. Maybe that's the real lesson of revenge. It doesn't actually heal you. It doesn't turn back time or undo damage. It just gives you a different story to tell yourself, a narrative where you're powerful instead of powerless. Whether that's enough depends on what you're looking for. For me, it was enough. Not because Brandon suffered, though I won't pretend his suffering didn't satisfy something dark in me, but because I proved to myself that I wasn't that powerless college kid anymore. I'd become someone who could fight back, who had skills and knowledge and the ability to protect not just myself but others who might have fallen victim to the same predator. I like to think that somewhere out there, Rebecca Torres and the other former clients who shared their stories after I created that initial opening, I like to think they're better off for having exposed what happened to them. I like to think I prevented other vulnerable people from losing their savings to Brandon's scam. That matters more than the revenge itself. Would I do it again? If I discovered another Brandon, another person using lies and manipulation to exploit others? Probably. But I'd think harder about the consequences, about the weight of holding that kind of power over someone's life. Revenge is seductive in its simplicity, but the reality is always more complex than the fantasy. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.